Hello and welcome to the WLJA Sports Blitz, the show where we talk about all local and Atlanta sports. I am your host, Will Cooper, joined alongside, once again, the Diamond voice of the broadcast, Diamond Dave Garner. Dave, thank you for being back with us.
Hey, glad to be back, man. Looking forward to diving in this morning.
So, Dave, this past Friday we had the opportunity to go and watch Creekview and Sequoia do battle in the Battle of East Cherokee Drive. Creekview came out on top in that one, but what's your assessment of the region now that that game is played out?
You know, I think Sequoia's probably woke up the next morning thinking, what if? You know, I mean, it was one of those games from Sequoia's standpoint that, you look at the 4 turnovers, especially the one there late inside the one. Whether or not that would have ultimately made a difference, who knows? But the other 3 turnovers prior to that in Creekview territory, I think certainly did. I still like Creekview coming into the matchup simply because of that big play potential that we talk about, the ability to strike quick. And with Sequoia's offense being the wing tee, once they got behind a couple scores, I knew it was going to be tough for them. It's just not the offense, as you and I talk about, that lends itself to being able to come back from a deficit. So kudos to Creekview, man. The Grizzlies, again, going on the road to Sequoia, tough environment. As we know, that rivalry has become quite a rivalry. 12th meeting overall. This one goes to the Grizzlies, hard-earned. And to answer your question, I mean, when you look at this region now, basically with that win, Creekview is sitting in that 4th or possibly 3rd spot, depending on how things play out. You obviously have to like Allatoona, you have to like Harrison, you have to like Dalton and what they've done so far. So you'd have to think right now that would be the pecking order. Add Creekview in there as the number 4 seed as of right now. We'll see how things play out. I mean, with Sequoia losing that ball game, they're essentially in a kind of a must-win situation now, especially late in the year when they play Allatoona. But a lot of football left to be played, so who knows?
And both those teams still have yet to play Harrison, and I still firmly believe that those teams have a shot at Harrison. You know, we talk about top 10 teams and stuff like that, and also you have to be careful coming from behind you because Sprayberry and River Ridge have both made some pretty big turnarounds, and I wouldn't sleep on River Ridge going into those games, especially the later they get into the year, because they have looked like a much improved team each and every game.
Oh yeah, you know, Coach Michael Collins, he's a Cherokee County native. He understands what football means in this area, and tons of improvement. I mean, I think when you take over a program like that, you understand the challenges that lie ahead, and obviously River Ridge is that one program in Cherokee County that hasn't really ever achieved that kind of success as far as playoffs, postseason deep runs and so forth. So I think it's understood. I think he knew what situation he was coming into. So really, hear all those little cliches, but it really is about changing the culture and the attitude. And I think already through the first half of the season, Coach Collins has done that. I mean, we've seen vast improvement. River Ridge not only grabbing a couple of wins, but even in their losses, they've been competitive. And that says a lot, going on the road to play Dalton, all the things that they've had to do already so far in the early season, playing the way they have. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I wouldn't sleep on River Ridge one bit.
And once again, that score against Dalton, I believe Dalton put up 42, but it really wasn't that far apart.
Right, it was closer than that. Yeah.
So looking ahead to this week, though, we have a really exciting matchup once again. We've gotten into the good inter-county rivalry games, and this is yet another rivalry game with the Battle of Town Lake as we'll travel to Etowah as they will take on Woodstock. And Dave, I tell you, I'm excited about both these teams, especially since Etowah had the chance and beat Cherokee last week.
I was going to say, man, I mean, what an unbelievable effort. I mean, Cherokee up 21-7 at halftime, I think, in that ball game, and basically didn't score again the rest of the game. Etowah comes back out of nowhere and wins that ball game 24-21. The thing about it is, you and I, and especially me, really like Cherokee coming into the year, still do. But now all of a sudden Etowah becomes that team. You had mentioned, I think, on last week's bit that the way they played Hillgrove. 2 weeks before that, obviously, the way they played Pebblebrook on that makeup, it was the following night because of the weather. I mean, this is an Etowah team that all of a sudden has found a rhythm. And as much as we've talked about Cherokee and what they've been able to do with their explosiveness and their big play potential, now all of a sudden Etowah has that. Dalton Miller, I mean, is just an unbelievable athlete, leading the county in a couple of different categories. They've got a good core of receivers with Rechsteiner and Bohannon, which, of course, both have Kennesaw State ties, obviously. The older Rex Steiner, which I believe is a cousin actually, is the one at Kennesaw State. And then, of course, you have Bohannon, who is Kennesaw State's head coach Brian Bohannon's son. Of course, Coach Bo played at Georgia, as we all know, coached at Tech. Now he's at Kennesaw State. But his son, all those guys kind of live in that Woodstock area, Town Lake area. And but Etowah, I mean, I'm telling you, man, they've really come alive defensively, have been able to shut some folks down, and just a huge effort over a very talented Cherokee team. I like where Etowah's headed. Woodstock, I mean, we saw some flashes of some really special things in that game against North Forsyth a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Woodstock was on a bye this week. So, you look at it and you think, well, Etowah playing the way they are, but now all of a sudden Woodstock's starting to come along, starting to find a little bit of a rhythm finally. I think it sets up to be a great matchup.
I agree completely. The thing is about Woodstock, is that they have so much talent in there, and that's what we always talked about, is that they have to be better than what they're playing right now, when they were going on that losing streak. And I think we saw with North Forsyth that, Ormsby in the backfield, he has the ability to really throw the ball around. And like we said, he's got guys like David Daniel out on the perimeter.
Right.
That's just a mismatch nightmare. But also on the other side of the ball, Etowah is the same way. Dalton Miller and Jackson Manns, those two guys are just electric, and they connect all the time. Me personally, I was very surprised they were able to put up 27 points, even though it wasn't overtime. Right. But they were able to put up 27 points on Cherokee after Cherokee had shut so many people out and just down.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you got to think about it as in Cartersville scored 28 on Cherokee, and then Etowah scored 27 in overtime. So, I mean, that's, there's really a lot to look forward to in that matchup.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Jackson Manns because and somehow or another I left him out. I mean, he has really been the main target. And, a guy that's a big play guy that we'll, be seeing, playing on Saturdays eventually. You look at the college talent, I think, coming out of this game. Etowah, Woodstock, even though the results maybe, not at the top of the region right now for either one of them. Woodstock obviously struggled with where they're at. But the talent level, man, I'm telling you, it's going to be on display Friday night. And I really like, we saw Greer, big defensive lineman, running the football a couple weeks ago, busting through the pile. Now, I had a problem hanging on with the ball, and I think that's probably why we didn't see him run much the rest of that game. But I wouldn't be surprised now that we're getting into these region games to see Woodstock maybe pull out a punch or two that they've probably been holding back to this point in the season.
And not that it matters for anyone else but me, but I'll be doing the sideline reporting yet again. And if anybody knows, I do film the games, and that means I'm going to have to get in shape. Because with these two offenses, they're going to
say, man, you'll be up and down.
They're going to air the ball out, so I'm going to have to get ready to run up and down the field, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So moving ahead here, we've talked about the local sports, but let's get into the statewide sports a little bit, and let's start where our focus is here at WLJA, and that's with the Atlanta Braves. They will take on the Cardinals here in just a little bit for Game 4. I didn't see an announced starter yet. I know they were talking about it at the end of last game, whether it be Keuchel or Tehran. For me, it's got to be Keuchel. I mean, I think it's really important to go ahead and nail this down and not even give him a puncher shot, if you will, at getting back into it. But also, let's take a look back at last night and take a look at that Game 3. I mean, what are your feelings about that, Gabe?
Well, first off, it should have been an elimination game because of Game 1, and you still have a bad taste in your mouth about that game because, we had a 3-1 lead going to the 8th inning and we blow it. And that's already old news. It already happened. I was hoping we would have done the show the next morning after that one because we would have been going on. Probably would have been a lot more negative, though. We try to keep things positive. But, that was very frustrating to watch. So, rewind to Sunday's game, Game 3, and basically the Cardinals do the same thing. They're up 1-0 going into the 9th inning. Donaldson leads it off with the double there. And then of all people with 2 out, Dansby Swanson, a guy known obviously more for his glove than what he's done from behind the plate this year, delivers just a clutch hit, probably the biggest hit of his career, to be honest with you, so far. And then after that, Duvall, how clutch has he been now in the last 2 ball games for the Braves? Comes through with the big hit to score the 2 runs, and then a little bit of drama in the bottom of the 9th with Melanson, but he comes through, closes the door, and man, I tell you what, I feel like they stole one from us in Game 1. I feel like we stole one from them in Game 3. So we're back now 2-1, obviously with 2 chances to get it done. Hopefully, like you said, they'll go ahead and close it out today. It'll be interesting to see the pitching matchup. The offense for neither team has really been there much. We've had a lot of low scoring games. 3-1, 1-0. A lot of close games so far. I'd like to see our offense kind of get off the deck and maybe have that breakout type game. It's tough in the playoffs, as you know. Obviously, you're getting everyone's best, especially from the pitching staff. Those guys are so zeroed in, so focused into the postseason. Runs are hard to come by a lot of times. But, man, I tell you what, I really thought after that Game 1 kind of meltdown that I was like, man, we're going to get swept. It's the Atlanta, pessimistic, defeatist attitude we have, I think, a lot of times as Atlanta fans to think that, okay, this is not going to go very well. And it's not over with yet, but I do like the way that this team's rallied. They showed a lot of resilience and a little bit of grit, something I wasn't sure they had, to be honest with you. I think the Cardinals are that team that knows how to win in the postseason traditionally. I'm not sure the Braves do. We've lost 9 straight Game 1 playoff games, and we've not won any of those series, and statistics will tell you that's the way it is. So if we're able to come back from a Game 1 loss in a 5-game series and win it, says a lot about the grit that this year's team has.
I couldn't agree more. And for anybody who's a fan of the drama of baseball, just a little note: the Cardinals closer, his name escapes my mind at the moment.
Martinez, I believe.
Martinez.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if you haven't seen the comments. He was not happy with Acuna because during Game 1 when he hit the home run, it didn't really matter, but he tossed the bat and did a little dance, does a little stutter step around third, which I think is pretty cool. But he was not happy with that. Well, in Game 3 last night, it was a 3-1 count, and he hit Acuna right on the elbow. I mean, it wasn't much, but it grazed him, and they had a look back and forth, and Acuna even mouthed off to a few of the Cardinals in the dugout. So that's something to keep an eye on. I highly doubt that it'll evolve to anything. Because especially that late in the game, you don't want to be that guy that, if he's the closer, then he's not going to come out and try and hit Acuna if it's
right.
If it's a big play. But at the same time, if you're a fan of storylines, that's something to keep an eye on. So certainly excited about that. And like we said, I still haven't seen a starter yet. I think for me it has to be Keuchel. You got the Cy Young, former World Series champ. He's been here before. Tehran, I don't believe, has had a very I mean, I know he hasn't won a playoff series in his career, but I don't think he's ever really pitched in any meaningful playoff games even.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Really, I think that I'm kind of with you. I'd like to see Keuchel again go back out there, and pitch this fourth game. And you just don't want to let a team. And not saying Julio wouldn't get it done necessarily. I mean, he's been that mainstay as a opening day starter for the Braves for many years now. And you'd like to see him maybe get an appearance. I'm glad because of the injury to Martin, it left that empty roster spot. And obviously with the playoff roster, you have to go pitcher for pitcher. You can't bring in an extra position player in that situation. So Julio Tehran activated as the other pitcher there. Not sure we'll see him, but either way, I think you've got to try to close it down while you can. And if you feel like your chances lie better with Keuchel, then I think that's where you have to go. And I think with his postseason experience, having been on that big stage with the Astros and winning a World Championship, I like him to be that pick there. But who knows, man? The way Snit'll go. I mean, it's. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
He does perform some head scratchers sometimes with some things he picks.
Yeah. He definitely came from the Bobby Cox school of postseason managing, and that's not a slight on Bobby, because we all love Bobby. We all know what happened. We all know what he meant to the organization, but. Real quick, and then I know we'll move on, but I think that's the one thing that kind of aggravates me about the Braves, and a lot of teams for that matter, is for whatever reason, managers want to manage different when they get in the postseason. They don't want to do what got them there. And I think it was John Smoltz that was talking about it the other day on radio. I heard him saying that, baseball is not a rah type, let's, run through a tunnel with fireworks type of game. It's really the more level-headed teams that treat the postseason like the regular season end up winning the championships. It's the opposite with football and basketball and soccer, where you got to get hyped up and raise your game another notch in the playoffs, and those sorts of things. Baseball's kind of the opposite, because it's a lot more of a mental game than people realize. And so those folks that are able to keep that even keel and do what got you their mentality tend to be successful. The whole righty-lefty thing, I personally think is a little over, I don't know. It's just, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is what it is. But anyway, hopefully we'll get through this fourth game, and we'll see what happens with the other series, because that one's actually shaping up to be pretty good as well.
Well, that's my next question real quick, just a one-word answer. Nationals or Dodgers, who would you rather face?
I think I would rather face the Nationals, simply because we have so much, we already know so much about those guys, and to me the Dodgers are a little bit more of a dominant type team. They obviously won well over 100 games this year, but the last time we faced the Dodgers, we took 2 or 3 from them as well. I like the Nationals simply because of the way that we have been able to play them this year head to head, and as many times as we've played them being in the same division. But at the same time, I don't know. You want to be the best, you want to beat the best too, and it might be something that if you're able to beat the Dodgers in a 7-game series, you earn a lot of respect. So who knows?
It's the longest one-word answer I've ever heard.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You know better than that with me, man.
I know. Moving ahead, so we've hit on the high points of the Atlanta sports. Now let's go. Well, real quick, Atlanta United won 3-1. From what I understand, it didn't really matter in the aspect. It's kind of momentum, but
well, yes and no. Yeah. And I'll give you more than a one-word answer here. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, real quick. I mean, obviously, it was the one thing I do want to say about that is Joseph Martinez back in the lineup and got a goal, 3-1 over the New England Revolution, the team that they will turn right back around and play in the playoffs. So, you're playing them here. Obviously, Atlanta United's been strong. Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think the difference between this year's team and last year's team for the United is the fact that they had a lot more adversity this year, whereas things kind of almost seemed to come easy at times last year. I mean, I know it's not, but it did. But this year having to fight through the injuries, Martinez being out a little bit, and all those different things, to see this team rally and still take second in the East and basically, hosting that, basically the same situation they were in last year. I mean, this is right where they were at. So I like Atlanta United, and I definitely like their chances, of course, against New England in round one.
So they're playing New England at home for round one of the playoffs? Yep. Okay, that's good, because Mercedes-Benz is definitely an advantage for the United.
It is an advantage, absolutely.
So we've hit on the good parts. We've touched everything we could as far as Atlanta sports goes. So now we got to get into the bad. Your Atlanta Falcons gave up 50 points to the Houston Texans. And I keep in mind this is a PG-rated show. How, Dave? What do we do? Where are we at here? I mean, I've been a Falcons fan for my entire life. My second team's the Chargers. The Chargers are really bad too. But I mean, I don't even know where to look for answers anymore. The offense, scores 30 points, which should be good enough for any NFL team, you would think. But at the same time, you can't give up 52 points. And Dan Quinn's supposed to be the defensive-minded coach we always wanted. I mean, where do we go? What do we do?
This is where I'd like to give you the one-word answer and just leave it at that. But no, I will give you an explanation. I think that, it's one of those things, obviously, where you're 1-4. There are teams in the past that have overcome a terrible start. There's teams like the Eagles and Giants traditionally over the years that have had those, kind of bad starts, but they've been able to rattle off 6 or 7 in a row late in the season and sneak into the playoffs and then actually advance far. There is nothing about this Atlanta Falcons team that gives me that hope. And I think that's the most mind-numbing thing about it is that, looking at this team and evaluating where they're at, there is nothing about this team that tells me that they could rattle off 3 or 4 in a row, even against some of the worst teams in the league, which, by the way, will be playing one of those teams this Sunday. I joked around last night on Facebook that the Atlanta Falcons are actually staying out west because they're playing Arizona this week. Instead of coming home and practicing and flying back out, they're actually going to stay out west this week to prepare for that game. And I joked around and said, "Why? Can they just stay out there, and not come back home?"
Right.
But anyway, no, I know that's bad. Everybody's, "Oh, you're such a fair weather fan," but no, it is what it is. I mean, it's just it's very frustrating as a Falcons fan. We've kind of become accustomed to seeing meltdowns and things over history, and I feel like that Dan Quinn in a lot of ways, there's just not really a lot of creativity on either side of the football. And I think that's the thing that bothers you the most is you feel like you have a little bit of talent over there, but you run the same defense. You hardly ever bring pressure, but yet you expect a different result. And, it's like you teach your kids or anything else, the same behavior is going to, it's not going to produce a different result. I mean, and that's kind of what we're seeing week in and week out is sort of the same stale game plan coming back to bite them in the butt. And I knew going into this game at Houston, even 2 weeks ago, looking at the schedule, I said, well, there's no way we're going to win that game in Houston. We're not going to go out there and beat Texas because they're a little bit more physical up front, especially defensively, what they do. I didn't like this matchup 3 weeks ago. Definitely didn't like the matchup coming into it on Sunday, considering what's happened. So, obviously it was a situation where nothing went right. There was not – that's the thing about this Falcon team is from an identity standpoint, if you ask me, give me one thing in a one-word answer, give me one thing that this team could do that they do well, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. There's just not one thing to me that this team does well.
Well, I'll tell you, it's the first time all season that I just have not watched the Falcons. I listened to them on the radio for just a minute, and I mean, I listened long enough for Houston to score 2 touchdowns, and that was enough for me. I mean, it's an embarrassment at this point. I don't understand how you can be so talented on paper and just be so awful at everything you try and do. Matt Ryan is not the Matt Ryan of old. He just doesn't have the eye for it. The offensive line has been mixed around a little bit, but I mean, come on. He's throwing interceptions left and right, and you can blame it on him, but I have to blame it on the defense. There's no way an NFL defense should ever give up 50 points. No. I mean, it doesn't make sense. That's a college score. 32 to 50, to 50 is a college score. Speaking of college, though, we're going to move on to the Bulldogs and then the Yellow Jackets, and then we'll finish up with your Vikings and then KSU and Reinhardt and look at those teams.
There we go.
So first off, we'll start on the winning end. So Georgia came out on top over Tennessee, big win over there. I think a lot of Georgia fans were disappointed with how they came out in the first quarter, performed. Once again, that wasn't a game I got to watch, but I did get to listen to it on the radio. I was driving for most of the day. So from what I heard, it sounded like that Georgia in the first quarter looked a little beatable, but after that, they kind of shaped up and looked like a good team.
Well, I had told my son at halftime of that game, they were trailing, 14-13 or whatever it was, and I said, you know what, I have a feeling that Tennessee's not going to score in the second half. I got a feeling this game's going to be, like a 41-14. Tennessee's all hyped up, come out of the locker room, totally different game, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm not always right. I'm not saying that I am, but you kind of let's just call it what it is. But anyway, no, but I mean it just kind of had that feel to it. You kind of felt like Georgia was going to get things worked out, and they did. I think 43-14, I think was the final, but Georgia obviously in the second half put them away. Tennessee, though, I'll be honest with you, I mean, you got to hand it to them. In the first half, they did exactly what they needed to do from a game standpoint. I think Kirby was a little conservative early on. I think he definitely elected for some field goals. I'm not saying that wasn't the right choice by any means. You put points up on the board. They have enough faith in Blankenship that if they get close, they're going to get at least 3. And so they felt like defensively they'd be able to adjust, and second half, came out, took care of business. The game that shocked me, I think, the most was the Florida-Auburn game.
Yeah, that one, real quick, we'll hit on the SEC in general here. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I didn't think that Florida was a legit top 10 contender. I still don't completely agree with that, and I think that when you see the betting odds for this week, I think that Vegas should always make the top 10 list because there's no bias in Vegas because everybody has to make money. LSU and Florida, LSU opened up at like a 20-point favorite or something like that, or maybe it was just 14, but either way, you can't tell me that you're looking at number 4, number 5, I don't remember the ranking now, but LSU's a top 5 team, and then you look at Florida, who's now a top 10 team. Nobody would tell you that that's a 14-point difference, so I think there's a lot of bias going into that one. Not SEC bias in general, but just maybe, Florida beat Miami to start with, and Miami was ranked, therefore Florida's ranked, and they don't look at it from the perspective of now it's week 6 or week 7. Going into this week playing LSU, I think LSU has a really good chance to open up and kind of prove that, Florida doesn't belong. And I know a lot of Georgia fans are going to be glad to hear that. And at the same time, if you're a fan of anybody in the West, you'd want LSU to win because, if you're an Auburn fan or, whatever, then a win over LSU when they beat Florida looks a lot better. So you got to play both sides of the coin. But I couldn't agree more. I mean, Auburn and Florida, man, I thought Auburn was a lot better than that. But Florida came out and through adversity. I mean, quarterback injuries, and they pulled it out. So credit to them.
Yeah, great, big plays, in that game. Was kind of surprised, even with the game being played in Florida. I thought Auburn Auburn might have been a top 5, top 6 team, like they were ranked going into that game. So for Florida to be able to win that game and to be able to hold Auburn to 2 of 14 on third down or whatever, I mean, that was really the stat that jumped out to me, and really the difference in that game is Auburn's inability to convert on third down and extend drives. Florida's defense, to me, is the real deal. Offensively, certainly question marks, but I like Trask, I believe is his name, quarterback for Florida. I was never a fan of Felipe Franks. I thought he was very overrated. So I think that Florida's probably, I hate to say that about a young man. I mean, personally, don't know the guy, obviously, but I think that they're probably in a lot better place, to be honest with you. Offensively, started to open things up a little bit with the new quarterback. So it'll make for an interesting matchup, obviously, like LSU Saturday night in Tiger Stadium against anybody in the country, for that matter, but especially against Florida. But, hey, you never know, man. It certainly sets up the Florida-Georgia game down the road to be interesting, especially if Florida were to come out of there with an upset.
Well, we're going to do quick picks now, where this is no spread. You just tell me who you think is going to win. Add a description if you'd like to. South Carolina's going to visit Georgia. That game's at noon.
Georgia.
Okay. You got Oklahoma and Texas at noon. That game's at Texas.
I like Oklahoma. The old Red River shootout.
Michigan State at Wisconsin at 3:30. That game's in Wisconsin.
I like Wisconsin in that one. Yeah.
Alabama A&M, or Alabama will travel to College Station. That game's at 3:30.
I think it'll be close early. I think Bama pulls win the second half.
Florida State, Clemson at Clemson.
Clemson, yeah.
And then your primetime games here. You got Penn State and Iowa at 7:30.
I like Penn State in that one.
USC Notre Dame at 7:30 at Notre Dame.
I like Notre Dame in that one.
And then your final big game of the day is Florida and LSU, number 7 versus number 5. That game's at LSU at 8 o'clock.
Oh man, I like LSU, but I think it'll be close. I really do.
Well, I believe with all those picks, I pretty much agree with all of them. I think that Georgia's going to have to prove that they're a lot better against South Carolina. I think you saw Alabama play against South Carolina and saw what they could do. So you're going to be able to finally get a measuring stick.
Yeah.
Also, looking at the other side of the coin, Georgia Tech. At this point, there isn't a lot to say about Tech. At this point, I mean, I think everybody knows that they're rebuilding, and the rebuilding season is rough. And, but at the same time, you got to look ahead and say, you know what, we got a top 25 recruiting class for the first time since 2007, 2008, I believe, when you had Calvin Johnson kind of come in with that class. Demarius Thomas was somewhere in there as well. So for Tech fans, there's not much to say this season, but except just to kind of hang in there.
Patience, yeah. Jeff Collins is a good coach. Not sure what kind of success he'll have ultimately, but it's going to take a season or two, and I think everybody knows that. Kind of like with the Hawks rebuilding process. I think the Hawks were starting a preseason, getting ready to start for NBA, and I like the direction they're going in with a very young team. But Tech is just going to take some patience, going to take some time.
So looking ahead at that one, you've got, now that we'll get out of Division I and get more to the local programs, KSU, Reinhardt, and Barry for you. Let's start with Barry. I mean, they're 5-0, went on the road, or was it at home or on the road?
On the road.
On the road, 55-0.
Yep.
So, I mean, the Vikings are 5-0, and are you guys ranked top 10 still?
Yep. Finally getting love. D3.com, we're up to number 8. Coach's poll, we're at least 8. We may have moved up. I think there was a loss inside the top 8 over the weekend. So, I haven't checked the poll this morning, but obviously did what we needed to do against Swanee. Swanee is a struggling football team. They give up a lot of yards on the ground, and they really have a tough time getting off the field. Pretty much had our way with them on the ground, racked up over 300 yards rushing. We throw the ball a lot. That's how we get our points. We generate big plays out of the passing game. We control the line with the run game. But Saturday we were able to rush, I believe, for 4 touchdowns, 500 yards of offense. Defense pitches a shutout, and that's what we were expected from ourselves to be able to do. And
also another partner of the program, the Dr. Larry Prather. His Reinhardt Eagles went on and beat Kentucky Christian University 71-21. So, obviously there's some big wins going around. I didn't hear much about that matchup. I'm not familiar with them, to be honest with you.
Right.
I know a little bit about Reinhardt, but I didn't know anything about Kentucky Christian.
Yeah, well, the Eagles have struggled a little bit offensively this year for Reinhardt, and so for them to be able to put up that monster number on Saturday was kind of from a frustration standpoint. I think it was nice to see these guys have that breakout game. And hopefully that will fuel the fire for the rest of the way. Obviously, a little bit down from where they've been with a couple of early season losses. Now, granted, one of those was to FCS Kennesaw State, who they played tough. But I like this Reinhardt team. They're going to have to battle through a little bit here late in the season, but hopefully their offense will continue to keep it going.
And the last local team that we have on the lineup is Kennesaw State. They were off this week after beating Reinhardt 31-7, even though that game was rain delayed. I believe they play Charleston Southern next. That's an interesting matchup. But I'll tell you, KSU is a very exciting team for me. I like, because we get to see some of the Cherokee County kids, some of them go to LaGrange, a lot of them go to Barry, some of them go to Shorter, but, the heart of that kind of middle ground, the folks that are pretty good, but not D1 good, but, still, I mean, Cade Radham comes to mind, somebody that made a huge impact in Cherokee County and then went on. We haven't seen what he's got to do yet for the Owls, but I think looking ahead, man, that's a really exciting school for a lot of people in this area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were talking about the Rechsteiner family earlier. Mm-hmm. Bronson, of course, at Kennesaw State. I think he broke a record, 221 yards rushing a couple of weeks ago on 12 carries in the game. I think before Reinhardt, and I'm not sure, can't come to mind who they played off the top of my head, but I mean they are a very exciting, dynamic, wing tee type team that you don't see as much anymore because everyone's running the spread. But Brian Bohannon has done a great job in a very short time establishing that program as a prominent, championship contender in the FCS division. And it's amazing how far that program has come in such a short time that they're able to contend the way they do. But yeah, they're very exciting to watch. Obviously, I'm tied up on the weekend, so I don't get to go down there and watch them. That's my alma mater. I'll go Owls, man, all the way. They're fun to watch, and looking forward to seeing what they do the rest of the year.
And Dave, just so we can clear the air, you're not particularly a fan of any college team, which is very rare to find in a football fan. But I think a lot of people, kind of like, oh, he's a Georgia fan, oh, he's a Georgia Tech fan, oh, he's a blah blah blah. But you're just kind of in the middle.
Pretty much in the middle. I mean, I cheer for the teams. It always cracks me up. I could never figure out, and this is not a knock on anybody, but there's a lot of like very passionate college football fans that they have tattoos of Georgia on or what, and never even went to the school. And to me, I got to thinking about that as a growing up. I was like, why am I so passionate about a Georgia Tech or what have you when I never even went to school there? To me, like schools. But and not to say that you can't. I mean, you can be an adamant fan of a program whether you went to school there or not. I mean, it's state pride. There's a lot of other things, but it kind of always cracked me up. And I'm like, I never went to any of these schools. Why would I be so upset and cheer so hard for for this school? But I did actually grow up kind of a Tech fan. I've gotten away from that, and I'll be honest with you. I just over the years I've kind of just lost the interest in the program a little bit. I have a degree from West Virginia, so I do cheer for the Mountaineers a little bit. Went to Georgia Southern, went to Kennesaw, cheer for those guys. Obviously, I'm part of the Barry radio crew, so obviously I'm a Viking at the D3 level. But I'm not that passionate, like Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama type fan that a lot of people are. But it makes it fun for me because I can really look at it objectively for what you and I do, and look at it and not be biased in our analysis of these teams and what's going on. And so, hey, man, it's fun. It's fun looking at it from that way, too.
Couldn't agree more. So look at this week here on WLJA. Of course, we'll have all the Braves action for you. Right now we know that they're going to play today at 2:30, which is about 4 hours from now, give or take. But also at the same time, later, if they do require a Game 5, that game will be played on Wednesday. We don't know what timing because it depends on a few other scenarios in the playoffs, but we will definitely carry it here on WLJA. Also, on Saturday, of course, we will have the Georgia-South Carolina game. You can tune in here to find that one. And then on Sunday, the Falcons will who do they play? I can't remember.
Arizona Cardinals.
Cardinals, that's right, with Kyler Murray. And Cliff Kingsbury, that's a new head coach over there. So it's going to be interesting to see on that matchup. I don't have much hope, but hopefully some of you do to kind of carry us through that one. But also, of course, you got Georgia Tech, I believe, has an off week this week. I don't believe they're playing anybody. And then, obviously it's a huge day of college football. So if you don't have anything planned, guess what? The weather's going to be nice. It's finally fall here in North Georgia. So pull you up a chair, get on the back porch, and tune it over to WLJA and get some folks around. And, make sure you tune in and listen. And, of course, our Cherokee County game of the week will be this Friday for the Battle of Town Lake as the Woodstock Wolverines, Georgia Tech will take on Duke, and that game's at Duke at 12:30, so I'm fired. But that's okay. I did get to watch Duke this season. I went to the opening Chick-fil-A kickoff game where Alabama played Duke. So I think Duke's a pretty good team, but, that's a little bit beyond the mark. But anyway, folks, there's a lot of exciting matchups, and, of course, we'll have the master Larry Prather back with us this Friday, so that means I'll be relegated back to the sideline, but that's okay, because then you can get ready for a Friday night highlight show the following week, which I know the kids really are excited about.
Absolutely. Hey, man, and by the way, though, real quick, you did a great job Friday night. Loved having you in the booth. I was glad you and I finally got to work together in that capacity. So
it's like a dream come true. And, if you missed it, I did drop the old line, kick me Jesus through the goalposts of life. So I think I'm going to put that on my tombstone.
The expression from your dad was priceless. And also from Michael Cersei. Everybody kind of looked at each other like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah. Hey, well, I didn't know what else to say because, Kaprowski was back in the backfield, and they don't throw very much. He had like 15 completions. And he just winds up, man. And he's got 3 or 4 different Grizzlies on him and just, McGee just catches it. And I didn't know what else to say, and for some reason I had heard my dad say that a bunch. That was what came to mind.
So you can blame him.
I do blame him. I blame him for a lot. I blame him for my shortness. I'm 5'8". It's real quick, Cooper story. My granddad is 6'2", and then my dad's 5'10". I'm 5'8", and I always tell my dad, well, that's great because my kids are going to be 5'6", 5'5",
exactly. Incrementally.
And they're going to hate me.
Good, man.
So no, it's not. But anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in with us on the Sports Blitz. I've been Will Cooper along with my partner Dave Garner, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the week. Of course, the Cherokee County Coaches Show on Thursday, the Pickens County Coaches Show on Wednesday, and the Gilmer County Coaches Show on Tuesday, which we'll get to hear about the Bobcats, Dragons, and the Wolverines and Eagles, respectively. So, folks, take care, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday.